Okay, so here we have an exceptionally important document. This is a book by Francis Mears called Pilatus Tamia, Wit's Treasury, being the second part of Wit's Commonwealth. And it was registered in September 1598 in the Stationer's Register. And this is a very important book because of its reference to William Shakespeare. Okay, so as mentioned, we have references to William Shakespeare. So let's just go through a few of them. This is also important because for those individuals who are what we call anti-Stratfordians, individuals who believe that either Shakespeare was a frontman for someone else or that the Shakespeare from the plays is not William Shakespeare of Stratford, et cetera, or that, as mentioned, that he's a frontman for someone else, and then there's a list of other potential authors. What's interesting here is that we have many lists, and it says as the Greek tongue is made famous and eloquent by Homer, et cetera. The English tongue, and now he's going to mention English writers, and then he lists them: Sidney, Spenser, Daniel, Drayton, Warner, Shakespeare, Marlowe, and Chapman. So obviously, certain individuals who they call Marlovians uh, think that Marlowe was the author behind William Shakespeare's work. But as we know, Marlowe died in 1593. Okay. However, here what's important is that there we have a list, and in the list you have Marlowe next to Shakespeare. So obviously they're two separate individuals. Okay, so now we have another reference to Shakespeare, and it's right here. And here, this is very interesting because we have a reference to Shakespeare and mellifluous and honey-tongued Shakespeare. And we have Venus and Adonis, and this would be the Rape of Lucrece. So the Venus and Adonis is 1593, and the Rape of Lucrece is 1594. And the sonnets here, we have a reference to his sugar sonnets among his private friends. And then it continues the reference to Shakespeare, and it says, and Plautus and Seneca are accounted the best for comedy and tragedy among the Latins. So Shakespeare among the English is the most excellent in both kinds for the stage. And then there's a list of plays here. We have 12. We have The Gentleman of Verona, Errors, and that's Comedy of Errors, Love Labour's Lost, Love Labour's Won, which we do not have an extant copy of, Midsummer's Night's Dream, Merchant of Venice, Tragedy, his Richard II, the Third, Henry IV, King John, Titus Andronicus, and his Romeo and Juliet. And then here we have another reference to Shakespeare. And here, as mentioned, we have all these other English poets that are mentioned. We have George Chapman, who some scholars believe is the rival poet in Shakespeare's sonnets. We have, once again, Christopher Marlowe. And here we have Spenser, Daniel, Drayton, and Shakespeare again, Shakespeare's works. Okay, once again, we have reference to Shakespeare here. And we have another list of writers: eloquent and witty John Lilly, Lodge, Gascoigne, Greene, and that would be Robert Greene, but he died in 1592. Shakespeare, Thomas Nast, Haywood, Mundy, Chapman, Porter, Wilson, Hathaway, and Henry Chattel. And in this section, we have another reference to Shakespeare being listed with other writers. Here we have Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, Sir Thomas Wyatt, Drayton, Shakespeare, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so the question is, why is this important? Well, it's important for multiple reasons. One, here we have potential dating, or at least it establishes 12 plays that were written before 1598. So for the dating purposes of plays, this is important. Also, we have a reference to Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucrece, 1593, 1594, which we know were already printed in quartos. So here we have a reference to those two narrative poems, and also with the sonnets. So we know that the sonnets, uh, the the sugared sonnets here, written at least some of them for his friends, for Shakespeare's friends before 1598. So obviously, this establishes Shakespeare as um, a playwright and author, poet, who was prominent enough to be recognized in this essay in 1598. And also, as mentioned, there's a list of other authors. And as I mentioned before, one of the arguments against Shakespeare's being the writer of his own works, which is often called the anti-Stratfordian position. There are many nuances in that position, but basically that he was a front man for another author. And then there's a list of the potential authors. The most prominent, the three most prominent, are the Earl of Oxford, Marlowe, and Sir Francis Bacon. But here, what's interesting is that we have these lists, and Shakespeare is placed next to many authors that are mentioned as the potential real author of Shakespeare's works. So, and we had Marlowe, who was placed next to Shakespeare. Um, okay, so this is a very important document, and it's 1598, Francis Mears, and it's external evidence, corroborating evidence of Shakespeare as a writer, a prominent writer in London in the 1590s, and that he is considered one of the best.